The storm and winds may...
Hi, I'm Terry Townsend, minister here at the New Concord Church of Christ in New Concord, Ohio. I want to personally thank you for joining us today via this live stream. The purpose of this stream is to simply share the good news of Jesus Christ. While we appreciate you viewing this stream, this effort is in no way intended to be a substitute for the assembling together with the saints. We recognize, however, that there are circumstances that arise that might prevent someone from attending church service. And for this reason, we provide a means whereby people like you can hear the gospel preached. We hope you enjoy today's message from God's Word. Please feel free to share this stream. If you're ever in the New Concord, Ohio area, we'd love for you to drop by and visit with us. We meet every Sunday morning beginning at 9:15 a.m. for Bible class, again at 10 a.m. for worship, and again 6 p.m. for our evening worship. See you soon.
You hold me in your mighty arms, forever safe from harm.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us via this live stream this evening for our midweek devotional period. In 1 Kings chapter 19, we alluded to this great chapter this past Lord's Day morning when we looked at Elijah in a dark, lonely cave during what we might deem his Jezebel crisis, and considered some things in his time of isolation that can help us during our pandemic, during our time of isolation. But in verse number 4, 1 Kings chapter 19, the King James Version reads as follows: "But he," that is Elijah, "he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. And he came and he sat down under a juniper tree or broom tree, and requested for himself that he might die. And he said, 'It is not enough. Now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers.'" I've never taken on 450 leaders of an opposing religion, as did Elijah. I've never called down fire from heaven. I've never prayed for rain until I saw the storm clouds gather. I've never run 25 plus miles at one time and beating a chariot who had got an earlier start on me. I have never done that. I've never had a queen threaten my life. A queen, Jezebel, who said, "I'm going to kill you as you have killed my prophets of Baal." I've never had that happen. But I felt discouraged. I've been depressed somewhat like Elijah. And I have said on occasion, as did Elijah, "I've had enough, Lord. Lord, I've just had enough." You've had those days. The alarm clock goes off. You've not got much rest the night before. You're already tired, but you've got to get out of bed. You've got to go to work. You're running late. The car won't start. Maybe you've got a flat tire. You finally get to work. Your boss is on your case all day long. You get a call later on in the day that your kids are having trouble with school or they're having trouble at home. And you finally leave work. You're just absolutely exhausted, only to get home and to find that the water heater has exploded, the stove won't work, the kids are yelling and screaming at one another, the spouse doesn't agree with something you've said or done, and maybe at that moment you say, "Lord, I've had enough." You see, we felt like Elijah. In fact, 1 Kings chapter 19 is a clinical study on depression. You can use the word discouragement, or you can throw the word depression in there whatever word you want to use, but I think all of us have at one time or another felt just like this great prophet of old. I'm ready to give up, Lord. I don't understand why You're allowing these things to go on. Your people have forsaken You. Others are trying to and have destroyed and put to death Your people. Lord, why is this going on? I'm ready to give up. Elijah, here in the first part of this chapter, he sits under a juniper tree and he's sulking. He's discouraged. He's depressed. In my studies, and I'm not an expert on depression. I've not had what has been classified by a doctor, prescribed as clinical depression, but I know some of you who are joining us tonight have. You've gone to the doctor and he has prescribed you medicine because he finds that you are clinically depressed. But I've been discouraged. There are 4 symptoms, if you will, of depression found in the first part of this chapter. And doctors have identified these over the years, but it's right here in God's Word. Number 1, we have fear and seclusion, verses 3 and 4. Number 2, we have suicidal tendencies. He's wanting to die, verse number 4. Number 3, there's excessive tiredness, verse number 5. And then finally, the feeling of rejection, not good enough attitude, verse number 10. Let me give you God's prescription, God's prescribed remedy, if you will, for feeling discouraged or depressed, overcoming discouragement or depression. From the text, number 1, we need to regain our physical strength. We need the proper rest as well as a proper diet. And it's prescribed here in this particular chapter, verses 1 through verse number 8. God allows His servant, His prophet, he goes a day's journey into the wilderness, and there he's again sitting under a juniper tree, and twice he falls asleep. Twice the angel of the Lord appears to him, and he provides him with the nourishment, the physical nourishment needed then to sustain him in what is about to come. That is a 40-day journey to Mount Horeb. One of the things you and I need to understand when we're discouraged, when we're depressed, is there's nothing wrong with getting some rest. That may be the best thing for us. Going back to what I said from the beginning, sometimes we don't get much rest at night, and the day that follows is a day of hardship, a trial. When we get home, what we need then is some good rest, but also proper food. I'm not talking about 5 to 10 finger dips into the cookie dough. Oh, I love that kind of stuff. That's not the kind of food I'm talking about. Or a big, extra large pizza with extra cheese and pepperoni, although I love pizza. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about eating the right types of food. Good food. Fruits and vegetables, these types. Daniel, when he was taken into captivity, that first wave that was led into Babylonian captivity, he was going to be made to serve the king in the king's court, and in preparation for that, those who were brought in, these Hebrews and her servants and others, were forced, if you will, to eat of the king's meat. A lot of fatty type foods, probably. The best of the best, but Daniel and his 3 Hebrew cohorts said, no, we're not going to do that. Give us a 10-day trial or so of eating nothing but beans, lentil, green beans, if you will, peas, and water. You know what it proved? After that trial, after that time, it proved that Daniel, his diet, prescribed diet by God, was what was best. We need to eat right things. We need to get proper rest. But notice in the second place here in this passage, verses 9 through 14, after we regain our physical strength, we need to begin renewing our perspective. God twice asked the prophet, why are you here? I think what He's trying to do is get His prophet to think about perspective. What is my purpose here? What am I to do? And God is driving that point home and allowing this situation to prepare His servant to go on to bigger and better things, as I mentioned this past Lord's Day morning. We need to regain or renew, if you will, our perspective. We need to open up the shade, pull back the curtains and let the sunlight in. And might I say S-O-N, light, God, His Son, His Word into our lives. And we need to renew our perspective. Why are we here? Christ came to seek and to save the lost. Luke 19, verse 10. And we as His people are commissioned to go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. Our purpose here, our aim should be to please God. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse number 9. Why? Because verse 10 of 2 Corinthians says, we will stand before God one day and answer for the things done in our bodies, whether it be good or evil. And so we need to regain our physical strength. We need to renew our perspective. And then finally, verses 15 through 21 of our text tells us we need to redirect our life. Redirect our life. In fact, I mentioned Sunday morning that maybe, the text starts out where Elijah goes to Mount Horeb, and there he enters into a cave and lodges therein. He's depressed, he's discouraged at this point. He's isolated in that dark, lonely cave. But the text ends, and maybe most encouraging words of all, in verse 19. So he departed thence. He left the cave. He redirected his life. God had told him while in that cave, why are you here? And then tells him what He's going to do. I've got a work for you to do. If you're discouraged, if you're depressed, one of the best things that you could do, not only regaining your strength, getting the proper rest, the proper nourishment, renewing your perspective, but it's then finally getting out of your cave of depression and going and doing something positive. God wants us to be doers of His Word. He wants us out in the battlefield, if you will, doing His will. Soldiers of Christ, putting on the armor of God, Ephesians 6, beginning of verse number 10. The prescription for depression or discouragement, overcoming depression and discouragement. Regain your physical strength, renew your perspective, and by all means redirect your life. Get back to doing God's will. Just some thoughts for this midweek devotional period. Thank you.